Everything that you're going to talk about today touches on some really important aspects of business.
Okay, so here's the plan. I want you to just forget that you have a life, probably not look at your health and well-being. I want you to talk to yourself really, really badly on the inside. How far would that person go? All of the shades of dark and light that we all naturally have, all of the warts and all of the background that makes us who we are as human beings and how we show up in our work and our lives.
There's a perception of what a leader should be. A leader shouldn't show any sort of weakness, or emotion might be something that other people think. Is that your experience?
We're still following a very defined blueprint of what being a leader looks like, or what the success trail looks like.
I come to you and I say, I've listened to stuff about self-love. I'd like to make a change. I'm not happy with the way things are at work.
What do you really want?
If you could share one nugget, if you like, with our listeners to take into their work, what would it be?
I think
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Uncommon Sense by The Uncommon Practice. I'm really pleased to say today that we are joined by Debbie Edwards, an absolutely brilliant guest. Debbie is a high-performance and transformation coach and a marketing specialist. And what's interesting about Debbie is that she takes, in my view, a unique approach to leadership and leadership development and developing high performance. So I was really keen to get you on the show and to speak to some of our listeners. So it's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. You say in your LinkedIn profile that you unlock the full potential of founders and senior leaders who are making a deep impact in the world. And I'm really keen to get into that. I'm really keen to get into how you work with leaders. And in particular, I think why this will be interesting to listeners and business owners and directors who are listening is because everything that you're going to talk about today touches on some really important aspects of business. So whether that's well-being, retention, mindfulness, high performance, self-leadership, these are all things that I think business owners and leaders will be interested in or should be interested in. So it's great to have you. It's great to have you along. Really excited to talk to you. For our listeners' benefit, could you start by giving us a brief overview of your career today? That would be great.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. First and foremost, I'm delighted to be here. I've definitely had what I would call a squiggly career, but there's probably been a bit of a theme throughout the whole thing in that I've always worked in what would be described as very male-dominated environments. So I started off as a marketing and training specialist, and I did work for the Northeast Museums and Galleries, but part of that role, we ended up landing a big contract with the ruler of Sharjah. So I delivered some business strategy out there for him, some training conferences. That was a very demanding role, but also a bit of an eye-opener as a young woman in her 20s working out in what was still a very male-dominated world. And women out there, as I was working out there, weren't even allowed to work. So it was an interesting one to navigate. I then went into the military. So I was a civilian officer in the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines. And I was responsible for filming all of their recruitment ads and doing their press ads. So working with amazing agencies like Saatchi's and Young and Rubicam in the day, it was very sort of, the 80s, 90s way of doing advertising, lots of champagne darling and all of that. But I loved that. That taught me a lot. Taught me a lot about resilience. Being a civilian in a military institution was quite challenging for me. And then since then, I've sort of worked for different organizations like universities. I've worked as a consultant. I've had 2 of my own businesses. And now I work as a high performance and transformation coach. And I feel as though every single breadcrumb of my career has led me to this point today because of the lessons that I've learned during that time, which for me were, in quite honestly, quite challenging environments to work in as a woman in particular. So arriving at this point of the core of my work being about self-love doesn't surprise me. and certainly doesn't surprise anyone who knows me very well. But it probably is the first time I've allowed the full expression of who I am to be fully present within my work and to be very unapologetic about that. So it's a bit of a wild ride at the moment, but because surprisingly, self-love, you think everyone would just want to hear about it and want to implement it in their lives, but that is not the case.
Well, let's get into that straight away, because I don't know if I said at the beginning, but I'm sure there will be people listening to this today who will immediately switch off, right? When you start talking about things like self-love. And this is interesting. So this was from one of your recent LinkedIn articles. Debbie writes some great stuff on LinkedIn, by the way, so I'd strongly recommend everyone to have a look. But you did say, when you in a recent article, you were talking about self-love and leadership. These were your words. Now, at this stage, some of you will feel like you want to run for the hills. Oh no, another woo-woo coach talking about self-love. I get that for some, this will go too far. And I get that too. And I think that there will be some business owners and directors who will switch off. But there will also be a lot of people who will be interested to understand what you mean by self-love and how it works in business. So for those who don't know, just take us right back to the beginning. When you're talking about self-love, what is it you mean?
Well, let me talk to you about what it used to mean for me first. I think that even though I talk about the presence of self-love now and the impact that it can have within organizations when I work with individuals, the most prevalent thing for me was actually when there was an absence of self-love. And that was very absent throughout my entire career. And it, for so many of these things, it's great now being 53 and being able to look in the rearview mirror and seeing a lot more breadcrumbs behind me that take me through a much more, robust journey that I've been on. But the absence for me, the absence of self-love being within my work, showed up in so many different ways. Firstly, not being very compassionate towards myself. Secondly, being very, very driven, but not realizing that I was being driven for the purposes of my work and not really thinking about the impact that had on me as an individual, as a human being, which led me to burnout a hell of a lot of times. But then I also had, within that self-love, I had some perfectionist tendencies as well. So I had this pattern where I would push myself to a point of burnout, but then my perfectionist would jump in and say, but what will people think of us if we burn out? That would be the worst thing. So my perfectionist would save me from burning out. But what that meant was that I would go to the brink, come back, to the brink, come back, to the brink, come back. And so many of these things were present. And because during that time, I saw everybody else doing the same thing. So I just had thought, because I'd never been taught any different, let's think about it. We go through school and self-love is not talked about. We go through work and self-love is not present or talked about. And actually, when you take it back to school, everybody will have a memory of someone being talked about where other people have sneered at them and said, oh my God, who do they think they are? They love themselves, don't they? And so from a very early age, loving yourself on any level is perceived to be one of the worst things you can actually do, because that means you're not humble, you are arrogant, you love yourself, and that shows up in a way that you think maybe you're better than other people. And actually the opposite is true. Deep self-love, which is the area that I work in, is about so much more than what people associate with self-love now, which is chuck another bath bomb in, grab another glass of bubbles, hey, it's wine o'clock. It's not about that. It's about creating environments within my work where I work with individuals on such a fingerprint approach way that they start to really come home to themselves, go to the inside, see who they truly are, learn how to love who they truly are, and then create this courageousness that allows them to then just show up unapologetically as they are. And the difference that makes in so many different parts of their leadership and the impact it has at home in their, personal lives is just phenomenal, So I completely get that people will think self-love is fuzzy, fluffy, woo-woo. Mm-hmm. But when I then start to unpick what's truly behind that and the impact that it has and the ripple effects across people's lives, that's when people really start to get it, because they suddenly think, I think I'd like some of that. Mm-hmm. You know, I've had 2 calls with potential clients in the last couple of days, and the first thing they've said is, whatever you've got going on, I want some of it. Right, that's it. So, you know, it runs a lot deeper, and from a leadership point of view, it's a very, very impactful part of my work, because those leaders start to walk differently, move differently through their organizations, and it's noticeable. It's really noticeable. So, yeah, we can dig into that.
Oh, I love that. So just to take back 2 things that you said. So when you're talking about self-love, what you mean is effectively, as it says, love yourself. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Deep love for yourself, though. Like in a sort of all of the shades of dark and light that we all naturally have, all of the warts and all of the background that makes us who we are as human beings and how we show up in our work and our lives. It's loving every part of you. It's that very forgiving kind of deep-rooted love that constantly, on a daily, hourly basis, you're saying to yourself, it's okay, I love you. You know, whatever shows up today, I'm going to love you no matter what.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things. So I thought it was interesting when you were talking about some people look at people who love themselves and see it as a negative thing. So I'm guessing you would say that there's a big difference between being selfish and self-love. Is that right?
There is. And sadly, you know, when people do look at self-love, even recently, I've seen articles where there was a report done by some nebulous, 3 people were probably interviewed, saying that, have we taken self-love too far? And some people were saying yes, because now we're starting to see narcissistic tendencies. And I just think it's crazy. Self-love is not about being selfish. But the truth is that selfishness itself gets a bad rep. At the end of the day, we cannot continue in all of the different hats that we wear throughout our day, whether that's as a parent, as a carer, as a sort of daughter, and then as a leader, as a manager. We can't wear all of those different hats and be completely selfless throughout our day, because then what you find is what we are seeing, which is then you've got thousands, millions of people around the world who are working towards burnout because they haven't been in service to themselves at any point throughout their day or their week or their month. And they're giving everything away to other people, and then there's nothing left. And in my work, it's about, and this is what organizations definitely want, is how do we bring great people into your organization and allow them to sustain themselves within their career, within your organization, and progress and reach that high performance without actually denying that they have needs? Because that's what we're expecting people to do. We're expecting them to not deny that they're parents, deny that they're human, deny that they have things that happen to them which are a natural part of the course of the life that we navigate, whether that's becoming parents, trying to become parents, becoming carers in that sandwich part of our lives, divorce, loss. We are navigating big natural transitions all of the time, thousands of people within our organizations, and yet we still expect them to turn up for work and deny that that's even going on. My work is about combining the two and allowing a space where that is just seen as we're just humans, there's a lot of mess, but we navigate through it. And we have tools within our armory that allow us to still perform, but also still be compassionate and tend to the fact that we have a life going on that needs our attention. It's when we put pressure on people to deny that life that I feel that's when people fall out of love with their work. They're not the best leaders, because how could they be when they've got such big stuff going on? And there's just not a lot of joy and playfulness in the workplace, and as humans, from my point of view, like I say, I've got to 53 now. I don't really want to work if I can't also feel ease, joy, bring play to it, and just have a sense that I'm alive in my work, that isn't that what we're here for?
So do you think that the reason that pervades in businesses where leaders in particular don't show that human side, if you want to call it that, authentic side I think you've talked about, is that because, do you think it's seen as a weakness to show that? You're the leader, there's a perception of what a leader should be, and a leader shouldn't show any sort of weakness, or emotion might be something that other people think. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I think there's definitely that we're still following a very defined blueprint of what being a leader looks like, or what the success trail looks like. So that puts a lot of pressure on people, because it is seen as, well, if you become a leader, or if you're out there in the world, or just generally as humans, there isn't much flex for someone to just fold sometimes, or just say, I'm having a crap day, or something is happening that is going to affect me for the next few months. Please, can we all just support each other? There's too much pressure on that old story of this is what a leader looks like, and they are stoic, and they are determined, and they are resilient, and then that word still, crops up. And your job as a leader is to just become so much more tolerant to all of the levels of discomfort that you're going to go through, and deny the fact that you've actually got needs. Whereas actually the opposite is true. What we find then is people tend to just shut down, or they don't feel as though they are the same person in work as they truly are at home. There's like this mismatch of how they show up in their work environment and who they truly are, which is probably why when we have social gatherings and people are a bit more relaxed, you suddenly look at one person and go, oh my God, I never knew that about you. Or, oh my God, look at them dancing on tables. There's a freedom that alcohol brings, but also there's a freedom in that environment that can sometimes make you think, God, you're so different in work. And sadly, what that means is that people are holding that. It's quite heavy, I think, when people feel as though they can't show up and still be taken as a very, prominent leader without not showing any vulnerabilities. Brené Brown talks about it a lot. Vulnerability is the gateway to much deeper connection with people you work with, people you manage, people you lead, people you stand on stage and globally try and direct. There's so much more behind that level of vulnerability that makes people go, oh, that makes me feel a bit better. Seeing you have a human experience gives me permission to have a human experience. And that means that you're starting to create a ripple effect of true liberation in organizations. Now imagine where that leads. Freedom to be yourself, freedom to show up fully as you are, freedom to bring that into your work and fully express yourself. The ripple effect is limitless, because that's the other thing about self-love that I love to say to people is there's no risk here. It's not like romantic love where there's a trade-off. So if I love you, please God, you love me, and oh, what do they think of me? When you are in relationship with yourself, that does not exist. It also, there's no limits to it. So, if I'm in a romantic setting, I'm trying desperately not to love too much, thinking that, oh, I'll wait for you to catch up with how much you love me. You don't have any of that. So there's no limitations to where you can take this and how you can use it to make yourself feel. So that's the other thing I say. It's like getting high on your own supply. It's limitless. There's no risk. And it's up to you what you do with it. And it's also a very, very personal experience. So it means that I can work very deeply with people and they can have a very unique experience which teaches them to step in to be a very unique leader. I'm not taking a blueprint and saying, oh, come on this leadership course. Okay, so this is where you should be at this stage. And I would like to take you to the next level. So here's my 7 steps to get you there. What I'm saying is, let me bring you home to yourself. Let's tap into what makes you great. Let's help you to see that you can love what's great and also the bits that you've still got to work on. And then let's lean into that love. And then that becomes the thing that helps you to become a leader.
Wow. there's so much there. Brilliant, thanks, Debbie. I think there's a couple of things, and I suppose one thing that, through everything that you were saying, and I was thinking about if I was a leader of an organisation, and you were coming to talk to me, and where my mind is going is that it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It is uncomfortable, I think, for certain people, I'm sure me included, to do that introspection. To if you've worked as a leader for 20, 30 years or whatever, or you've finally got to a position of leadership, to then have that, you talked about vulnerability, so to have that level of vulnerability to almost look inside yourself and actually be honest with who you are, that must be difficult for people to do.
Completely difficult.
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable. And I did a talk in December, and it was about how can we build resilience in our leaders. And I had already said to them, well, I'm going to be talking about self-love, deep self-love, and how that factors into that. But there were people in that room when I started to talk about deep self-love. If this had been a different era, they'd have probably chased me through the streets with torches. Because some of their faces, and one guy actually was very honest. He came up to me at the end. He said, I don't know whether to love you or hate you. And I was like, oh, okay, I can. But interestingly, that wasn't an easy room to be in. But because I love myself deeply, I was like, good for you. Good for you. So if that's how you feel, fair enough. I don't understand how that is making you feel and the reasons why. We all come with our own levels of background and things that have made us who we are. But the people that come to me and just go, I don't know whether I like it, but I'm curious to find out if it works, they're the ones who then walk through that gateway and then suddenly see just how transformational this can be. But I get it. I've had conversations with close loved ones, and they say, that's an uncomfortable area for me because something deep inside. And I do think it goes right back to those teenage years where being seen as someone who loves yourself was the worst thing you could be. And I think a lot of people, when I said that in that room, so many people went, yeah, they were the worst people. It's like, oh God, So I do understand that there are some deep-rooted old stories that hang around, that make us feel as though this is selfish, this is self-serving, this is arrogant, this is narcissistic. And it means, some people, even when they come and work with me, they say, this doesn't mean that I'm going to, not be able to love my kids the same way, does it? And I get that. I understand that, they think that, well, if I'm going to be selfish now, all of that stuff over there that I've been serving is going to fall over. And that's going to be my fault. And I don't think I can cope with that. So we have to work through those stories and unravel them. There's a lot of unlearning of old stories around success, what being a mother looks like, what being a parent looks like, what being a good leader looks like. Unlearning all of that process so that we can then replace it with, what does that mean to you? What does being a mother look like to you? What does being a father look like to you? What does being a leader? How do you want to feel in that role? Because the truth is, nobody's ever asked them that. How do you want to feel in your job, John? People will ask you, what do you want to do? How do you think you should be doing this? What are you going to manage next month? All of the functional pieces are all there. We're very comfortable with that. But if somebody said, how do you want to feel in your work? Most people would look at me blankly.
Right, yeah. And I completely understand that, because you've got me thinking, and I don't know what my answer would be. Honestly, I don't know what it would be. I think the thing that strikes me when you're talking about this stuff is that you talked about unlearning. And that's really interesting, because I think there are a lot of businesses, and particularly more traditional businesses, who will find this difficult. And leaders who've got to a certain point I suppose that there's this unwritten rule of professionalism, if you like. It's almost like what you're saying is, I think we need to redefine what professionalism means. That's how I'm interpreting what you're saying. So professionalism has always been, you come into work, you work at that time, and this is how you behave when you're at work, and this is how you dress, and this is how you talk to people. Now, what you're saying is, obviously, professionalism is important, and how we show up is important not just to the work that we do, but also, you know, people's impression of the company and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is that companies maybe need to rethink what they allow their employees to be like, how they behave at work.
Yeah.
Is that the sort of thing that you're saying?
Well, I'll give you a good example, and that's why it's a very new concept to attach deep self-love practice to high performance. So let me give you an example. So if I was a sports coach and an athlete came up to me, so a footballer, rugby player, whatever, and they came up to me and they said, right, I'm on the cusp of really taking my career to the next level. And then when I get to that next level, what I'd really like is to have a nice, good 10 to 15 years of performing at my best. And then even another 5 years after that, where I've got a deep understanding of, okay, I'm on the other side of my career now, but I still want to be here and I still want to be present. I would not, as their sports coach, say, okay, so here's the plan. I want you to just forget that you have a life. I want you to run around the pitch for anywhere between 10 to 12 hours a day. I want you to probably not look at your health and well-being. I want you to not have anyone to support you with your stress levels. I don't want you to really think about what's going on for you with your mindset. So if you could go home and maybe, you know, drink a bit more every night. And if you could not be present for any of the things that you want in your life. And also, while you're at it, I want you to talk to yourself really, really badly on the inside. How far would that person go in their athletic career if that was the advice? But if you look at all of those component parts, how many people, and you're smiling because you know either some of those apply to you or some of those apply to many, many people that I've been that person who's done all of those things and pushed myself to the brink for the purposes of work without even thinking, what's the impact on me, my body, my mind, my spirit, my emotions. But if we were to look at our own selves as athletes, we would never advise somebody to do some of the things that we just do by default. And that's really part of my work right now, is unlearning the old ways of leadership, creating a conscious awareness of what modern leadership needs to look like, and then making sure that I can demonstrate that there are huge benefits to the things that we would normally call, you know, I hate the words high performance because even that feels like old language, but I have to make it tangible so that people understand, okay, so here's what high performance when you're loving yourself looks like. But as you were smiling there, I knew you're like, you would never hear a sports coach telling someone who wants to work at a top level in athletics, that's how you need to do it. Off you go.
Yeah. And it also strikes me that if you are going to have any chance of succeeding at this, you are going to have to go into businesses who may not have values that align with what you're aiming for. And so it's not just a case of trying to get the individuals on board. You've almost got to win the organization, or I don't know whether you can actually mold the organization or whether you'd go in and say, I'm sorry, but unless you start to change the culture and the values here, there's no point me coming in.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've encountered? I mean, where does that fit into it?
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest projects I worked on, I was brought into a family-owned company, and they had these huge targets. They wanted to move themselves from like 22 million turnover to 25 million turnover. And they asked me to come in as a consultant to help them do that. There were a certain number of opportunities on the table, one of which was to expand their offering into charities. Well, just looking at that right from the outset, I realised that the culture that they currently had, if they were going to be working in partnership with lots more charities, we had to work on some of the things that were currently present within the culture that would probably repel the charities because they had a particular culture themselves, which was, again, much more service-led, very compassionate, a little bit softer in the way that they operated. So I got to work with the CEO, the senior leaders, and then cascaded it right throughout every single part of the business, making sure that there were soft touch points so that when we created this partnership, they came in and felt like they were at home. We were talking their language. We were working closely in partnership. When we were having conversations, it wasn't the hard-hitting board meetings that we would normally have. There was a much softer element to it. There was much more compassion. There was a slower pace to some of the things that we did. There was also a bringing stories together. So some of the guys who used to do the deliveries, for example, I would bring them in to talk to some of the senior leaders in the charity and get them to talk about the real stories of how they were both changing lives by doing their jobs and really getting to know each other. Now, without realizing it, it's only on reflection, I was bringing deep self-love into every aspect of that business. And I was allowing it to then emerge so that they could have a much deeper connection. That increased their bottom line by 3 million in 18 months. So there are tangible elements that I know businesses would want to hear. But for me, what that left them with was not just the cash, not just the bottom line stuff, but a much more robust culture that was then able to expand their relationships with other, charities as well. And it was just like, well, this is just who we are now. So when these people come in, we welcome them like this, we speak to them like this, we develop a project like this, we cascade it out like this. And there was love at every single touch point. Everything from the way that the tech ran, the way that we managed customers, the way that we onboarded customers, the way that we then sent out parcels to the customers. There was a love touch point every part of that. And the results spoke for themselves.
It's almost a self-fulfilling, sort of self-perpetuating culture that you're creating by changing people's mindsets and the way that they're approaching the work and how they turn up to work and the conversations they have with clients and the conversations they have with each other and the pressure they put on themselves. It's really, really interesting how now I'm starting to understand how businesses could use this idea. I'd like to talk a bit about I'm interested to understand whether you think this is a generational thing. So that might be a massive topic. If it is, apologies. And I have to say I absolutely hate it when people say, they put millennials is the one that was the buzzword a few years ago, and they put people in a box and they say you're a millennial, so you think this way, and you're Gen Z and you think that way. I hate that because everyone's different. But at the same time, I'm going to sort of contradict myself here. I'm wondering whether actually younger generations are less willing to put up with the level of expectation or stress that older generations who saw their parents do that and who saw their parents do that. What's your impression of that, Pin?
Well, I've got two daughters myself who are 22, soon to be 22, and 19. And I do see a difference in them. I also, as a parent, though, have very much worked with them around their self-love and understanding what their values are and what they will stand for and what they don't want in their lives. So I know that, I'm in a very fortunate position that I can subtly coach them, and have really lovely conversations. And I definitely see from them, they do look at that kind of world and flatly reject it. Which is already something that organisations need to be considering. What is... So if the old success blueprint looked like what I've just described, run around the pitch for 10 to 12 hours a day or even more, don't eat, don't even go to the toilet, all of that. If that was the success blueprint of old, the focus has been very much about how can we manage hybrid, whereas for me, the new hybrid is... how can I fully blend my work and my life and let it all feel joyful and let me thrive within it? I want it to be exciting. I want it to be thrilling. I want to feel like a human in it. I want to be a human being, not a human doing. And young people are definitely forging their own paths. A lot of them are doing, multi-hyphen careers, which was, that was a term that was coined years ago, but I think even more so now. They don't need a term for it. They just want to get on and do it, and I love that. But I think what you've got is that what I see at the other end of the scale is people get into their 40s and 50s and for different reasons going, I can't do this anymore. I can't work to this blueprint anymore. I feel claustrophobic. I'm in a box. And also, if you think about it, you get to sort of 40 and you've still potentially got another 27 years to go. And then you go, well, okay, so that means I'm expected to go up again and up again. And then they think to themselves, I've got nothing in my locker. I've got nowhere to go. I feel a bit broken. I don't know what I've got to give anymore because what I've already given feels like far too much. I've sacrificed enough. And they want something different as well. And they're also parents to teenagers. And they're suddenly thinking, well, you guys are forging a new way. Why can't I have that? So there's definitely movement. There's definitely shifts. There's definitely more openness to different ways of working and different ways of thinking and feeling. And I love that. But it does mean that lots of companies will absolutely need to look at their diversity and inclusion in a very different way. It will be about how can we bring people on into our organisations who want to feel differently and who want to create and craft a different life, who want to be the mastery, have like an art to their work. Because we've never actually fully explored why that can't be the case. Why can't you come in and feel like an artist in your work and let it fill you up? You could. There's possibility there, but we still have that old way of thinking.
I think a lot of that is to do with culture. I think we talked about that, and I think about performance metrics has obviously got something to do with it. Trust
is a big part of it.
If I'm being tasked, I don't know, just thinking about professional services, if I'm tasked to do a set number of billable hours a week, it's difficult for me to then say, I'm just going to be a bit more gentle to myself and back off on those hours, and then it's not going to reflect well on me if I don't meet my target, sort of thing. So I do think there's that element to it. If I could go back to what you were saying, and people are more willing to explore. So let's say I've listened to what you've said so far, and I'm thinking, this is great. I love this. I want to find out a bit more. I'm going to go and see Debbie Edwards. How I'm interested to know how that would work. So how could you give me an idea? I come to you and I say, I've listened to stuff about self-love. I'd like to make a change. I'm not happy with the way things are at work. I'm going to burn out. I can't see I'm going to keep going for another 20 years. What do you do? How does it work? What do you say?
It's very unique. It depends on your entry point. I get people at all different stages. We work very quickly on saying, what do you really want? Because most people are not living what they really want. They're living a version of what they are expected to want. And because of that, they are probably living to somebody else's expectations or fulfilling a life that on the outside ticks all the boxes of, that looks like a very successful person who is humaning very well. It's like tick, tick, tick. We all breathe a sigh of relief. But quite often they're not. And there's been this niggle. And for some of them, it's always been there. And they've never acted on it. For others, it's become more prevalent, and it's actually then starting to seep into their health or their well-being. But we work very much on me saying to them, I need you to tell me and be really honest with yourself what you want. What do you really think you want? And we work on that. And then we start to help them to unlearn all of the things that they currently thought they want, so that they can start to let that go without it feeling as though they're falling off the edge of a cliff. Because that's really important. The pace of this work is so important because it needs to bed in. It needs to actually change you on a cellular level. There's a definite science to my work, so we work on a cellular understanding. I work on nervous system management, and I also work on a deep understanding of how you work neurologically. So there's a neuroscience element, and there's a psycho kind of thing. So, it's complex, but it's very simple. And then we get to work on the thing that they really have come to me for. And I have to tell you, there's a lot of people who are finding that they are currently doing something that they're not happy with, or that they don't feel they're valued with, or they've lost their passion for it. And we just get to work. But, to give some examples of how that actually looks in practice, is once we've discovered what you want, how you need to love yourself in order to be honest with yourself about what you want, and then feel as though it's okay for you to go out and get it. Quite often what you find is that people then want to leave their current roles, or they want to expand within it very differently. So then we work on, well, I need you to know that it's safe for you to get what you want. Because a lot of people don't make that jump. They want things, but they don't think that they deserve to get it. So then I work on making sure that they understand they are fully worthy of getting that. And then we work on, and did you know that getting it can be simpler, easier, and more fulfilling, and more full of joy. So a client of mine who I worked with a few months ago, who was coming out of one business and then figuring out what she wanted to do next. We've had a little bit of a break, and she rang me and said, oh my God, this stuff works. So she'd exited the business in a really positive way. She had then built up her deep self-love in a way that made her see just how worthy she is and valuable her skills are. But at the same time, we had detached her self-worth from her work. Really big part, which meant that when opportunities were then presented to her, she wasn't then thinking, ooh, that's going to go, people are going to think I'm really nailing it if I get that title, so I'll go for that. She was very clear on what she wanted. I also, deep self-love goes into financial negotiations. I'm not telling you that deep self-love is all the fluffy stuff. It's okay, this is the hard-hitting stage, so I'm going to work with you on how your deep self-love shows up when you're negotiating the next financial package, and when you're negotiating your work conditions and what they're going to invest in. She ended up getting a 40% increase in her salary because she stood in her worth. She also then negotiated the cost of the investment in working with me throughout the next couple of years, and they're paying for that. And she negotiated, these are my terms for how I will work. And that's because I've helped her to understand that doing less does not mean that she's not good enough. Mm-hmm. Doing less means about, as a leader at a certain level, we work on depth, not breadth. Mm-hmm. And it's detaching our egos from needing to be the fixer in all of those situations and being seen to be the one that's busy, always solving everything for everybody. But actually this is about, we're looking after you, you are the source, and then we work on that translating into your leadership. But it doesn't always mean doing more. Mm-hmm. It means really considered ways of leading. Mm-hmm. So, it works in a very unique way for every different person, depending on where they're at and what they say they want. And then we just get to work. So for another person, it could be they want to go out for, another client I've worked with, they were going out for a second round of investment, and they felt really lacking in confidence about it. Mm-hmm. So again, we go into self-love. We make sure that you are understanding how amazing you are. And then you go out and ask for 3.5 million and you get it. Or you don't, but you don't walk away thinking, that's because I'm not good enough, or that's because I'm not worthy of that, or do you know what, this isn't going to happen to me because I'm not driven enough or motivated enough, or I'm just not that person who works at that level. Mm-hmm. The no comes, you go, thanks, move on.
Yeah. I'm also interested to understand in those conversations. We spoke a few weeks ago and we were talking about this podcast and doing my research as well. Mm-hmm. Before this. You talk about one specific question in your I don't know if you call them coaching sessions or consultations, coaching sessions. And the number one question you've written here is that you ask people is, how can I love myself even more deeply right now?
Yeah.
So can you tell me a bit about that and what that question means and where it came from?
It's a very powerful question, and I use it in all of my work. So everybody that works with me, at some point I will ask them to spend time on that question. And there's a reason for it. So, there's actually some science behind the way that the question is broken down. So, first of all, you start off with, how can I? So, the way that our brains work, we treat our brains like Google every day. So we are probably firing 1,000 questions at ourselves every day. But the majority of them, when you're in a work environment, might not be very nice. So it's like, oh God, why did you do that? Why did you say that? Why can't you be more that? Why can't you do this? So it's about giving them what I call an anchor, just one question for the day. So instead of asking yourself 1,000 questions, you're only allowed one. But your brain likes it. So we're toying with playing with the brain. The brain says, oh, yeah, there we go. She's asking us a question again. Great. But then you say, how can I love myself? And the brain goes, oh, that's different. So something sparks in your brain that's a bit different, and it sits up and takes notice, because that's not a question you normally ask yourself. So it readies itself because it's interested. It's like, that's new. Okay, how can I love myself? And then you say the words even more deeply. So what happens then, by asking yourself that internal question, you are already sending a signal to yourself and your nervous system and your brain that you, on some level, already love yourself. That is like reinforcement strategy. So that is just a really soft way to get your body and brain to start to feel like, she loves us. Isn't that great? So how can I love myself even more deeply? And then you say the words right now. That's really important, because for the majority of people who are moving through their working day, being very present for yourself is probably not something that you are conscious of even making a choice to do. So just the fact that the end of that statement can, after raising your awareness, making your brain happy, creating a situation where it sort of sits up, then you're sort of on some deeper level saying you really love yourself, and then you say right now. It brings you back to a present moment, which means that you then can make a decision. And all I say to them is, see where your body wants you to go with this. Play with it. And most people will spend a day and go, well, that's different. Mm-hmm. And then they'll spend a week and they'll say, I've changed. Then they'll spend 30 days and then they'll say, I'm not the same person anymore. Some people, I did it when I first started doing this work, I did a 6-week transformation program. And at the end of it, they all just said, I'm not the same person anymore. I even walk differently. I hold myself differently in meetings. I say things that I never would have said before, to people that I've needed to say that to for a long time, because I'm standing up for myself, I'm standing in my power, but I'm also doing it because there are other really small things that I ask them to do that also bring a level of science into it. So there's things like, so your deep self-love, you may be, so let's give an example. Something I might have said might have really annoyed you at some point, but you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to bring that up. But then your deep self-love kicks in and says, actually, what you said there was really not great. And then you might come to me and I might not respond very well to that because I'm not in my self-love. You're way beyond me. I'm not in my self-love. And so you have to be real that even though somebody's walking around with this level of conscious self-love, not everybody else is. So then I'll teach them different things where I'll say, okay, so some of my clients work in male-dominated environments or work at board level. Tricky conversations happen. And I'll say to them, right, so your next technique is to do what I call the heartbeat technique. And that's literally, again, being present in your body. And I say to them, so in that difficult scenario, all you need to do, and nobody needs to know about it, is you just wait for your heartbeat to beat 3 times, 5 times, whatever you need. And then you tip your head to one side and you say to yourself, oh, I wonder what's going on for you. And in that moment, I'm not asking you to be compassionate for that other person. I'm asking you to offer compassion to that person so that your body can regulate. It works wonders. Mm-hmm. Because suddenly they feel as though they have agency in that moment to manage what could be a very difficult situation without over-managing that other person's emotional response. So I'm giving them these tools because what I'm really saying is, if you are able to self-love and self-regulate, it doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. You have agency. You are in charge. It changes people's lives, and there's such simple techniques. You know, that question, I know there's a science to it, but it's not rocket science. Me saying, let your heart beat and tip your head to one side, it's not rocket science, but actually it is. It's scientific, because everyone that uses that says that it's their first go-to now in any challenging situation. And what that does is it allows their body to not absorb the shock from somebody else's emotional dysregulation. That gives people peace back. It gives them time back. It allows them to know they're in charge, which that level of agency and self-agency for a leader is priceless. It allows them to then say things like, hey, I can see that something's going on for you. How about we reschedule? Rather than jumping into the argument with them and both of them then being in the water, you know, just having a scrap. So there's so many very simple things that I do that create such monumental change and transformation that, you know, like one of my clients said, it's like I've got all these secrets that are just so powerful. Why doesn't anybody else know about this? You know, but it's just, for me, I suppose I describe it as just being human. I don't think we've truly learned how to connect human to human in our workplaces, because there's so much politics, comparison, competitiveness, you know, drive. If we're all following one blueprint and we're all driven that way, there's going to be an element of us all trampling on each other to get there. You know, it's understandable. But if we create a different way, if we allow for a very tender, unique fingerprint approach for everybody's experience within their work, that starts to create this expansive space where people just want to connect differently. They want to understand you differently. They want to give you that space to say what's going on for you. You know, when you create that environment, what you've got is a very deeply caring, supportive, inclusive environment that just happens naturally because everyone's just in their own self-leadership and their agency. But it's coming from a place of love.
Yeah.
You know?
It also strikes me as well that what you're saying, it's also about being probably kinder to yourself.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I was talking to you before we started, you know, we had a sort of mini session a few weeks ago where you asked me that question, and it was quite profound. And I can speak as someone who is a good example of someone who now I will try and ask myself that question on a daily basis. And even at work, it's, you know, there was the two examples you gave were great. So one example might be, I've got a presentation, I've not finished it.
Yeah.
You know, normally I'd beat myself up about it and think, oh, I've got to get this done. And it's about, I suppose, thinking, actually, do you know what? It's okay. I'll finish it tomorrow. It's not the end of the world. Okay, obviously we've got deadlines if it needed to be done. But it's just about being a bit kinder to yourself, I think, in that situation. And the other thing that I thought was interesting you were talking about is sort of self-love and being kinder is sometimes about being more robust with other people. It's about saying, no, I'm not going to tolerate being spoken to like that. Or it might be thinking, I'm just going to say it, you know, whereas ordinarily we might just sit back and not.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing an element of self-love is also about not worrying so much about what other people might think about you. Is that right? Yeah,
it does. It allows the worry and fear of judgment from others, for you just being you, to fall away. You just fall away because you suddenly realize when you detach yourself from your work, you realize that. So if I say to you, you've asked me to do something and there's a deadline. Now, if I'm in my self-love, I will go, actually, John, I can see that you've got a deadline there. I'm going to go away and look at my schedule because what I don't want to do is promise something to you that I can't deliver. So give me 10 minutes and I'll come back to you and we'll have a chat. So I'm not then worrying oh my God, what does he think of me? Does he think I'm not competent? Does he think I can't do this? And is he, upset with me because I haven't said yes immediately and just said, no problem, I can do that. But in that moment, I'm thinking of myself. So yeah, there's an element of selfishness that leads to us understanding each other better. So I'll go away and I'll look at my schedule, and then I might come back to you and say, I tell you what, look at what I've got on. Look at the deadline that you've set for that. It's not realistic, John. Right, what can we do with this deadline? Do we need extra resources? Do we need more support in the team? Are you setting that deadline because you're fearful of what people might think if you can't deliver it then? And then we'll have a conversation that's just human. One human understanding that this isn't going to work for us. But you know what? Nobody's at fault. It's just that we need to detach our self-worth from this, and we detach our fear of judgment, and we need to just find a solution, and then you both walk away as adults going, yeah, well, that was good, wasn't it? And we're still getting it done, but we're getting it done in a different way, but we both understand each other, and neither of us are put under pressure, or walking away thinking, I said yes there and I wanted to say no. Now I'm going to deliver that, but I'm going to be really resentful for the next 2 weeks while I get to that deadline. That doesn't serve anybody. And again, that's where the deep self-love comes in, is that it's reminding people that when you say that resentful yes, that doesn't stay in the other person's body, it stays in yours. And for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, you are managing resentfulness that's building up into anger, stress, anxiety, worry, probably not wanting to perform at your best, definitely not enjoying the process of that piece of work. And it's all those little scenarios that actually add up to somebody just generally not enjoying themselves in their work. So yeah, it does lead to you being a lot kinder, but it also leads to you being a lot more robust, a lot more resilient, because also self-love allows you to tolerate the discomfort of some of those circumstances that previously might have made you feel, I can't say no to John. Well, you can, but you just have to have a conversation and say, hey, this is how it looks, it's not going to work, So I don't think people realise, though, how freeing that is, because, I've worked in, big offices before now. So many people are just walking around with things that they wish that they'd said, or things that have been left unsaid that have festered. And it causes so much trouble, politics, resentment, people falling out, or people just not being as close as they need to, or even just having a general compassionate understanding and like for each other. I think this, working at this level, what I've seen is that people go back into their workplaces and have a much deeper connection as a leader, much more compassion, and have better conversations with their staff and employees that mean that they get closer to them, but then they're also not worrying about, oh, I really need to tell so-and-so that their performance isn't great right now. They just tell them, but they can deliver it with compassion and understanding, but they're still going to get to the same point. None of this means, self-love doesn't mean that we don't still have deadlines. We don't still have financial targets. On a personal note, we still have ambitions and dreams and desires and motivations, and we're very driven. It doesn't take away from that. It just allows a different vehicle for you to deliver all of that. And that's the thing that, that's probably my biggest mission, is to say, guys, there's another way here. And it's really simple. And it just means that, yes, there's a little bit of like my client said, it's hard work, but it's the right kind of hard. There's a little bit of work up front, but the minute we start to individually take responsibility for how we feel about ourselves, and then allow that to be sort of the ripple effect in work, things will change dramatically.
Which leads me neatly onto I've got one more topic I'd like to talk to you about, because I know it's something which you are passionate about, and you've written before, and you're an advocate for sure, and that's women in business and women in leadership. And we talked earlier in this conversation about how self-love is important in big, when you're going through big changes in your life. And there's a couple of areas that I think impact women, unfortunately, more than men, and one in particular is motherhood. I think. And it's something we've talked about on this podcast before, isn't it? About managing work-life balance. And we've talked before about how would I have the same conversations with, male guests as female guests, and that's not right, but it shows the inherent sort of bias and issues we've still got.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to understand how self-love comes into that idea of motherhood and work, and work-life balance, I suppose. And also another thing that I've seen you've written about and obviously impacts women is menopause and those changes that happen there.
Yeah.
So and I know you've written a program on menopause, I believe.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to understand how self-love and women in business, how it would help them.
Oh God, that'd be a whole other
big
podcast.
Topic.
Yeah, it is a big topic, and you're right that well, there's a lot to unpick there, isn't there? That work-life balance, as I say, I feel fortunate to be 53 and look back now, but there is no balance. There is no balance, and there's the whole you can still have it all, that came in the 80s, but that just meant you can do it all. That's all it meant. Having it all meant doing it all, and it's impossible as a single human being to do it all, because we're not just talking about small things here. Motherhood for me in particular was a bit of a wild ride. It really was. And I didn't truly understand the emotional impact that would have, especially when I tried to continue to have a forward-facing career, as in I still had ambitions. I still wanted to achieve my dreams, but it was as if I couldn't see any role models who were being very unapologetic and standing up and saying, I want to be in the boardroom, but I'm also a mum, so actually I'm going to fit that in between the hours of 10 and 3 because I really don't want to be rushing around in the mornings and I still want to be present of an evening. There was nobody doing that. And so, there were times when, for me, the pressure was enormous. There was one particular time when I had a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, and I got headhunted to be the director of a marketing agency. And that was, that expectation in my head. It was like, I've made it. Ta-da! It was like, I felt like I'd go to my parents and go, look, I know I was a bit of a rebel and a wild child, but look what I did. I've achieved what you thought. Tick, 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 perfect daughter. And then, I was this kick-ass mum who was, had the kids and then was rushing off to board meetings. And the reality was I was killing myself. So the reality behind the scenes was I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, if not earlier, so that I could get everything ready to send the kids off to nursery and have what I considered to be mother bonding time. Then I would drop them off at nursery at like 7 o'clock. And I would get on the road so that, because I had a 2-hour commute, so I would drive for 2 hours, get into the office, do a full day, be thinking about my kids all through the day because there was the guilt that just sat there. And then I would leave that office at 4 o'clock so that I could race down the M58 and the 57 with a level of anxiety in my chest. How I didn't have a heart attack in those years, I do not know. Thinking, I'm going to be the last mum who picks their kids up at 6 o'clock. And that, my poor kids, because at the same time, I had pressure from, like my mum, who was an old-fashioned parent who thought, what are you doing? What are you doing putting your kids in nursery for all that time? You should be a mum at home. There was a massive, there were so many campaigns in the Daily Mail at the time. There was a particular journalist called Peter Hitchin who just literally called out all of the world's problems, all of the problems that were going on with children, and saying it was because of working women. The pressure was enormous. It was like I was constantly thinking, I'm going to be responsible for the downfall of my children. They're going to turn out to be, as he would call them, society's best delinquents. And it's all on me. Mm-hmm. And that famous saying of, I was expected to work as if I had no children and mother as if I didn't work. And that really was what I tried to do for many, many, many years until I got ill.
Yeah.
And I got ill with what was, severe endometriosis that I didn't know I had until I eventually allowed myself to go in and have an investigative operation, which then led me to having a full radical hysterectomy, which sent me into menopause overnight. And I was only 37 at the time. And by the time I had the hysterectomy, I was 39. And I still had 2 small children and a big career. I think at the time I was running my own business. I tried to make it all look invisible. I try, and I've written an article on LinkedIn about this, and I'm partway through writing a book. And it's about the invisibility of our womanhood in the workplace, because we do make everything from menstruation through our fertility years, through our motherhood years, through to our menopause years, completely invisible so far. We've had to work around it, work within it. But, I look back on those years and I was like a robot, because I was literally doing that. I was thinking, I've just got to get through this. And there was no self-love. All of it was, okay, I've got this amount of energy. You kids get that. You husband get that. You parents get that. You work get that. And if there's anything left for me at the end of the year when I take a 2-week holiday, that's when I'll absorb that up so I can go again. And it was the relentlessness of that. It was what I call perpetual forward motion through some of the biggest transitions in my life. Denying the existence of my life for the purposes of my work is something that I work on now because I'm so passionate about it. Nobody should have to deny their natural transitions that they go through just so that they can turn up for work and pretend that there's nothing to see here, jazz hands, because they are normal, they are human, we all go through them. And the more space we can give for people to experience them fully as the individual. My journey is very different to any other woman out there. The more space we can give that, the more we will build environments where women actually feel like they can progress in a way that feels fulfilling and thrilling and vibrant. And also they can do that bit that we've talked about for my entire career, which is get more of them into the boardroom, more of them into entrepreneurship, more of them funded and backed by finance. That's when we'll start to see changes. But we're getting them to a threshold where they're exhausted and they go, I'm tapping out. I'm tapping out. And all of that gorgeousness and amazing skills just disappears. And I'm 53, and I had a lovely conversation with a potential client yesterday, and I'm rewriting the rule book about what my life looks like from here on in. I don't want to retire. I want to have a career probably like my daughters want to have, which is really, I fully expect to be doing my most amazing work when I'm 80, on stages, writing white papers, advising governments on this stuff. I'm not going to step into any more boxes because I've done that. Even when I was 47 and setting up my tech startup, the level of ageism, because I was a woman 47 going into a tech industry that is very young, it's not on. It's not on, and I've got so much to give, but now I've decided I'm going to create my own blueprint and I'll give it on my terms. And I will work in areas that I find thrilling to me. And I'll do it from wherever in the world I want to be. But that does not stop me, and it's not going to stop me. So, yeah, for women, we've still got a long way to go. And I hate saying that because, people will probably say, oh, but haven't we progressed so far? No, it's not enough, So there's still a long way to go. I think some of my work in bringing much more inclusivity to my self-love work. Last week I did a masterclass with 50 people and a big part of them were men. That makes my heart sing because it means that we're bringing men and women closer together. That's where the changes will happen, is when we become allies for each other. You know, we talk a lot about we need male allies to help women, but actually when it will really work for all of us to be free and truly liberated, to be ourselves, to be our fully male selves and to be our young selves and older selves, is when we create a connection where we step towards each other and say, let's be allies for each other and let's map out how that could work. And if organisations were looking at it from that point of view, we would get a lot further, a lot faster.
So any women who are listening to this, who are going through those changes as we speak, new mothers or mothers who are struggling like you were, or going through the menopause or just any other changes, your advice to them, I don't want to put words into your mouth, so what would your advice be?
Really be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Remember, there's something about remembering that we are taking our bodies along with us for this ride that we call life. And for young mothers, women going through the menopause, for women who are going through fertility challenges, for women who have decided they don't want to have a family, we need to give the space for all of those decisions to be present, first and foremost. And then we need to give the space for each of those unique experiences to be able to flourish. The truth is, we're just not there yet. Because, you know, for women, we have to remember that we have to tend to our bodies. You know, we carry babies for 9 months and then we're expected to bounce back. You know, it's like, you know, where's your bikini body after you've had a baby? It's ridiculous. Whereas I love some of the older traditions that we would have had in place years ago, which is they consider postpartum to be a 4th trimester, and that's 40 days of you staying at home, tending to your body, and especially what's going on for it biologically, tending to those parts of you that need to heal from the whole experience, and then that level of bonding as a family. And what should happen is then we have a community around us where people turn up. They don't turn up so that they can hold the baby and you make them a cup of tea. They turn up because they've cooked something, or they've knitted something, or they just want to hand you something that says, I'm thinking about you. Or they'll say, do you want me to come and just listen to how you're feeling? You know, this level of human connection is missing from some of the most powerful transitions that we have in our lives. And it's missing for fathers too. You know, it's missing for men too. It's easy to talk about it from my point of view because, as I say, I've been around the sun quite a few times and I've been through all of the life transitions. But the truth is, there's a man going alongside something with me at the same time. And there's no space for him to talk about this stuff either. What's it like to be a new dad? Or what's it like to be a dad of 3, John? And still manage a career and maybe bring with you the expectations that you're the breadwinner or that you're the provider. You know, we all have the baggage of expectation, and we all have old stories that don't serve us as a unique individual in our own unique setting. So it's the same for men. Men don't have as much freedom as they need to fully express themselves, and there aren't enough spaces for them to show up and say, I'm not good. You know, I'm not good. I'm not feeling great. My inner dialogue isn't great. So, you know, from my point of view, I've moved my work from being, even though predominantly working with women at the moment, my biggest desire is to truly make that as inclusive as I can and bring everybody into the self-love space.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, and it's very profound. And I think what you've just said about men as well, I know we talked a lot about women there, and all I can speak from my own experience is, I think, having had a few conversations with you on this topic, and I'm not going to lie, you know, when we first started talking a few months ago about this, I was one of the people who, as I said right at the start of this show, was, you know, run for the hills, and I don't know, I'm not into any of this. But actually, you know, I think for me it was about sort of understanding that it's not a weakness to think about yourself occasionally. It's not weakness to give yourself some space, to not always beat yourself up about deadlines, not always trying to be perfect with absolutely everything. As you mentioned, I have 3 kids, so it's about understanding that I can do my best at work, but I also have to, I've also got a family life outside. And sometimes, especially at the moment with a very young child, that has to take priority. And the unfortunate reality, I suppose, for me, and hopefully for some men listening to this, is if you don't give yourself that time and that space, the inevitability is burnout. Which is, we're talking, at the start, well, how is this relevant to companies? Well, it's relevant because burnout is something that's a major problem. If you want to retain staff, you need to be kinder to them, and you need to understand that, people do have lives outside of work. Some companies will be more willing to accept that than others. So I can speak personally and say that it's, the work we've done has been really helpful. I do ask myself that question on a daily basis. So the final thing I want to ask you is what we ask every guest who comes on this show, and that's, the title is Uncommon Sense. So if you could share one nugget, if you like, with our listeners to take into their work, what would it be?
I think be curious about there being another way. Be curious about how, no matter what stage you're at, it's never too late to consider that you might be able to do this differently. If you are under pressure, if you are one of those people who, like me, took yourself to the edges of burnout and just thought that was acceptable, it's never too late to change. But just be curious. I remember your face when I was talking about, you were like that, looking about, like there was some answers somewhere.
So obvious.
Yeah, but I get it, and I actually make a point of it in some of my socials now where I go, I know you want to throw your flip-flop at the screen right now, and it's uncomfortable for some people, but I think that's why I keep it so simple, and that's why probably my advice is spend one day asking yourself a different question, which is, how can I love myself even more deeply right now? And just be curious enough to let it take you to all the places that your inner wisdom has probably wanted to take you to for a long time.
That's brilliant advice. The whole, premise of this podcast is uncommon. And that's why I was desperate to get Debbie on here, because I feel like this is uncommon. And we are trying to get people to think differently and business owners to, appreciate there is another way and be curious. And I think for me, there will be business owners and employees who have listened to this who will have switched off half an hour ago. There will, though, be a few, hopefully more than a few, who will have listened to this and thought, this is something I really want to explore more because it has benefits. It has benefits for me personally. It also has benefits for my company. Resilience, retention, productivity, performance, mindfulness, well-being. These are all things that company owners should be interested in. If they are, how can they get in touch with you, Debbie?
They can connect with me on LinkedIn. They can also find me at _Debbie Edwards_ on Instagram. I don't have a website yet because I just work on referral only, which is lovely. But I've just launched a new program called Love Pioneer, which is exactly what I've talked about today, which is taking leaders and entrepreneurs through a 3-month program, teaching them how to love themselves deeply and allow that to impact their performance, their growth and their success. Because I, as a growth strategist, that's my sweet spot, is that I still work with companies who want to scale massively, but now they have to learn how to fall in love with themselves at the same time. So, yeah.
Debbie, it's been fascinating. It's been a really interesting conversation. Thank you for being so honest.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us on Uncommon Sense.